Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And we're sitting here laughing because Josh was watching that intro talking about how much he misses ice fishing. So I know it's that time of the year where I guess apparently everybody feels like that. I started seeing a few ice posts come out on social media, and with all this heat and I guess all this smoke lately, people are really thinking about that cool, crisp air. So with that being said, it's not that time of the year. And I think that was evidenced by the water that we were fishing this past weekend because, boy, we got out there and okay, so here's what happens to at least me, and I don't know if you're the same or different, right? But you're like unloading the boat, you had just driven somewhere, yada yada, your graphs are like sitting out in the sun. And so when you first dunk your boat in, and then it shows you like a temperature, but then you have to give it a minute and wait and make sure that it's actually reading the water temperature and not whatever the sun was just shining at it, right? And so sometimes it ticks down a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't go all that far, right? But it seemed to not go down. Like we launched that boat in and it was like mid 70s was
No, it was mid 80s.
Okay, that's why I was like, oh my god, what was it? It's like because it was like mind-blowingly warm. And then because I hesitate because we went to two lakes, right? And so a smaller lake and then a much larger lake. And the reason that happened, we went to our smaller lake, we thought that, oh, fishing is going to be on fire right now. I think it was a little warm for that. And those fish were as on fire as the water was. Because what we actually had to do at that little lake when we saw those 80 plus water degree temps is we had to wait until the sun kind of really started to go down. And what had happened is I think all those fish were hiding in those weeds and they were waiting to push out because I kept suspecting, look in that deeper water, but we found such hard thermoclines and the water was just so warm right down to that thermocline. I think so many of those fish were just hiding right under those weeds. So when that sun went down and it was no longer blazing hot, then we did catch a few more. And so it was pretty interesting. And then we made it our goal. So then for Sunday, we were going to use that next day to find slightly cooler water. And we did, but it was still mid 70s. And we did find a slightly better bite.
Yeah, I would say a significantly better bite. I think what we suffered from on Sunday was just kind of, we hadn't been on that lake very much. So we were just kind of doing a lot of spot checks. Man, you got a bunch of smallmouth. And
you put all the crappies. That's how it goes. It's just funny.
But they were like, just like the other lake, they were hiding way in the weeds. And, as, we troll panfish a lot. And this time of year can be pretty difficult just because the weeds are up. And if the fish are in the weeds and not like staged on the edge, you have to go through weeds. And so like trying to keep your bait out of it is kind of tough, but we did get a couple nice fish and some surprise pike, which we don't usually run into over there.
But I think we were also experiencing some pretty strong winds that day. And so what was happening is there was a ton of minnows in this lake. And so a ton of that bait was being pushed over to that end of that water. And so when you have the weeds and you have food and all that good stuff, that's where the fish were hiding out. And so like you said, I think it was a little bit of one of everything. And as far as that pattern, I do think those fish are going to keep sitting in those weeds and some of them are going to push off into those deeper areas, cribs and that kind of stuff. But we weren't quite at that part of summer yet.
So. Well, over by us, one thing I wanted to note is that all of the bait fish up in the shallows, usually you'll come across like a handful of little bluegills or, a bunch of, whatever fathead minnows or some shiners or whatever sitting in the shallows. But like the boat landing was covered in 2-inch perch. Like 1.5 to 2-inch perch, like covered. There was like maybe 1 or 2 shiners sprinkled in there, but it was like a sea of those little perch. And so that's something that I'll take with me going into the next one. So keep an eye on those boat launches when you go in and out of the water. That'll help give you a leg up on what you should be throwing.
Well, that is true. That's that match the hatch that you always hear about. So I guess those are a lot of good tips that people can take coming into the weekend. And I think I'm going to keep looking for water based on what's not going to be super hot. I don't know. That was 80-degree water temps. That's
Lake
bath water,
Michigan.
yeah. So, anyways, let's see. Well, first of all, if people at home have, what are your water temps? Let us know where you are, what those water temps are. I'm interested because if it's way better than my water temps, I'm going to come there instead. But let us know because I'm interested, or what baits are working for you because I'm interested in that as well. But I know our guests will have tons to say about that, and I think they have tons to talk about. So I'm so excited. So thanks. Yeah, bring him in. Thanks so much for being here, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a while, and it's good to be back on the show.
Yeah, right before the show, we were kind of reminiscing on how I thought, man, I feel like you were just on the show like 2 years ago, and then it's been way longer than that. So we have a lot to catch up on. But in case tonight is the first night that somebody is meeting you or listening to you, can you first introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So Joe Bricko, owner of JT Outdoor Products, specialize in building technique-specific fishing rods. And then I'm also a tournament angler. So fish a bit on the National Walleye Tour and a lot of the AIM circuits for a lot of years, and some MWCs, and even mixed in a few MTTs this year. So it's been a whole mix of different tournaments. So it's been a jam-packed summer. And then, like I was telling you guys, I just got home from an Alaska trip. So that's fresh off of that with some good stories.
And man, Alaska sounds pretty refreshing this time of the year because you always think cold. Is it still cold there?
It's Southeast Alaska, and the interesting thing about Southeast is it never gets really warm, but it doesn't get that cold either. They rarely get snow that sticks. They fish, open water on the ocean year round there pretty comfortably. So, I mean, you look at some of those temps in Ketchikan, Alaska, where we were, in the dead of winter when we're in an Arctic blast at, minus 20, and they'll be 40, 45, 50. So it rains a lot. That's what you have to get used to there. But the water does stay cool. You're talking about the warm water temps, and we had 51 degrees on the ocean there. So so we did find some cooler water, but we had to go we had to go out to the Pacific Northwest in Alaska to find it.
That's a farther range than my weekend's going to allow.
Yeah, it's a tough drive.
So I know you were just saying that you were away. Do you happen to know water temps like around your area in Minnesota, or you just haven't been out really recently?
Yeah, we fished a tournament in Grand Rapids shortly before I had left, and it was in the low 70s. But this heat wave, around here, kind of like you guys, came after that. So I'm sure it's up probably 10 degrees or something. But yeah, we were finding low 70s before I left for Alaska. But I'm certain there's on a flat day around here, you would find 80 likely. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, definitely.
It does make me miss ice.
Definitely plays a role. So I know when I go outside, I don't feel real active. So I can imagine the fish are the same.
Yeah.
That is actually a really good point. And, I was talking about those bluegills that were under those weeds, but we were finding that, so I will admit, like, live scope is not like perfect in shallow water, but you could see some of these fish under the weeds. And what we were noticing actually is how many fish were under there, that even as the sun was setting, even as the bite was starting to pick up, there was so many fish that were just refusing to eat. And we threw one of every bait at them, and they were just bogged down.
They weren't feeling it. Yeah, like people, when it's this hot, you want to be in the shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So let's imagine the day where everything seems like it's biting, because we do run into those days, right? And those are the days that you try to be really ready for. And so I think rods is, one of the first things that people think of arming themselves with when they think of, getting some good fishing gear, right? And so I'm switching over to, I guess, like, JT here, because you have these really cool, you made mention earlier, technique specific rods, right? So can you tell us a little bit more? How did you come up with that? And like, where do we start when we're looking for the right technique for us?
Yeah. So it takes me back to the beginnings on why I started the business. And it was really, really born through tournament fishing. I've been tournament fishing started in 2000. So 26 years now. And as I was, trying to, be successful and, kind of learn the ropes, I realized, how important equipment is, and how important it is to have a full lineup of rods. Back then I was using, G Loomis, and I was, a college kid, and I was looking at tournament guys, and they got, they show up at a tournament and they have 30 rods. And I'm like, well, I don't have 50 grand to spend on fishing rods. They're way, way too expensive. So I'm like, I'm going to have to find another way. So fast forward to 2014, when I started, the business and got, a little bit more serious about, doing it, and had some additional, resources from that initial thought. I started it because I wanted to be able to have a full lineup of rods for myself, selfishly. And I wanted to create something that would give, me an advantage. As a tournament angler, you're constantly looking for, just little ways, subtle ways that you can, create that advantage. And I just thought by building, high-end rods where I could, do them at a discount, because I was, putting the labor into them and the design work, I would be able to create that, advantage for myself. And then from there, I started realizing how many voids there were in, technique specific rods, specifically things that we were doing here in Minnesota, throwing light jigs really far in clear water, bobber fishing, a really good bobber rod, or a really good jig wrap rod. I was finding there's a lot of voids in that. So the opportunities were just, kind of flooding in to create the perfect rod for all those, different applications. And then kind of like how you guys, came on, we were looking for people that could bring, good ideas that are basically masters of their crafts. So once we started building a pro staff with, what I think is of people that are really at the pinnacle of the game, whether it's, crappies or walleyes on the national tour, or pike or muskies, I was able to get the best input. And it's people that are on the water, doing it, making a living out of it, trying to create that advantage to win a tournament. I was gaining all that information, and that's really where I would say JT is a lot different. When we go to build a rod, we're not focusing on, hey, how can we catch an angler with, pretty colors and things like that. Not saying we don't have nice looking rods, but our focus is really on, okay, how do I get input from Hall of Fame anglers where we can create a design from scratch piece of paper that's going to give someone an advantage. And we take that input, we use the same people to prototype those rods. So the engineering and the design, comes from people that are at the peak of their game. And then we're also testing with those folks and then applying it at a real high level. I feel like that's very different than a lot of companies out there that are, putting guides on rods and perhaps making it, look pretty. Our mission is the design and the engineering that goes into it. Things that you can't always see until you actually, use the rod. So we're all about performance. And that really goes back to, the reason I started the company. I was leaning on that performance to give us that little bit of an edge. So, and from there, it really took off. We have a lot of National Walleye Tour anglers. My whole team fishes the aim in multiple tournaments, and we lean on the product heavily ourselves. So it's a lot easier to talk about it when you're using it and you're having success with your own product too.
Okay, so I have to ask, were you a tournament angler first or a rod builder first?
I started tournament fishing first. So that was way back when I was in college. So that was around, I started tournaments. The first tournament I fished was in 2000, and then started the business in 2014. But that's when I started getting into some higher level tournaments. Those first 14 years were, small stuff that you probably wouldn't even recognize or people wouldn't even know existed. And, I didn't start fishing tournament circuits until about around that time. And that's when I started the business as well. So So just a lot of focus on performance, technique specific, and then just creating that advantage is really our mission.
Well, and that's, you bring up, you're not the first person on our podcast to bring that up. We have a friend, Matt Steffen. He does the MLF, and he builds all of his own rods.
Mm-hmm.
And so he doesn't sell them, but I think it leans into what you're saying is that, by you guys going out tournament fishing, prototyping your own rods, and then making those rods available and like selling them under a technique specific line. I really think that that says a lot, right? If there's multiple tournament anglers doing that, and then you have a whole team of tournament anglers working in the shop, these are tournament rods. And, I think a lot of people know that Emily and I build rods ourselves. We don't really do it except for the fact of just learning how to do stuff and just having that skill. But we use all your stuff because we can't, honestly, we can't make anything that fits our style of fishing any better. And so I just think that what I'm trying to give merit to what you're saying. Like, I just think that is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
but you bring up a good point.
And this is something that we love to talk about all the time because, like Joe, exactly like what you're saying, there's tons of product that hit the market every year. And that's fun. And it's great to watch. And as an angler, I love it all. That's great. Right. But there's a certain amount of those products that did have a story, a history, trial and error behind them. And those are the products that were made by fishermen for fishermen. That's the part that I say all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's because when you have a niche, when you have a need, when you have something with a purpose, and it's not just like a random product, and sometimes random products are great. Like I said, I love those, right? But when you have something by fishermen for fishermen, that's going to be a good product. And so you don't find that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that can be said about, a lot of products. They're only as good as, the people or the person that designed them. It's got to be done with knowledge base and for an actual, purpose. So we look at that. We lean on that pretty heavily. So if I'm building a certain type of rod, I'll tend to lean on a pro staff person that specific, technique is their favorite, or they're really, really good at it. Like a really good jig fisherman. It's like, okay, what does this rod, need to have, for this technique.
The other thing that I'm really going to applaud you guys is that even though you have a range of rods, the styles for whatever you're doing, there is even other options. Like if you want a specific handle style, if you want, different colors, sometimes you offer different colors. There is still different options in all of these. So that's the thing though, is then it's like a little bit overwhelming. But then I always tell people you got to go to like a show or an expo, right? Because you always have really great staff around to explain that. But you guys also have some pretty great displays, even in places like Shields and stuff now.
Yeah, Shields has been a great partner, and that's that's what's keeping our shop really busy. They give us their POs for the ice rods in March, so all summer long, talking about ice fishing. You opened. That's what we're consumed with right now. Our production right now is really heavy on ice rods because the volume that goes through there, we have to start that production in March. And if we're not right on the ball, the second that they place their orders, we miss some of those, delivery dates because it's a lot of rods, and those deliver September 1st. So the summer flashes by fast. So it's always a big juggling game. In March, you get the fishing opener for long rods. That comes a big surge of panfish rods kind of start, panfish long rods, and then it's, walleye rods, and you get into bass rods. We just released a line of bass rods called the NLB, which is short for next level bass, which is taken off way better than what I expected. So we're juggling. So March until September is just like pure chaos in the shop, and we can't hire enough people. You probably see we're on our Facebook page. Hey, we need more rod wrappers. Mm-hmm. So we're going 100 miles an hour, and production is 6-7 days a week right now. So, and it's a ton of ice rods. So.
It's amazing to hear, because I think people don't often appreciate, okay, let me start this even somewhere else, because you go to a website like JT, or you go to an event and you see the big fancy booth and you're like, ooh, wow, they must make like 1 million rods a year. And then to some extent, even if you don't say it, you assume like, oh, some of that must have come from like wherever, or must be made wherever, but it's like what you guys are doing is still you guys are a local Minnesota company. Like you guys are still making your rods here.
Yeah, every one hand built here. And that's what our customers really appreciate, because of how we laid out our retail space. Is it's open to the production. So the front area isn't a door that you can close and you gotta kind of peek back through there. It's open. I mean, we're inviting people to look at our rod racks or look at tackle or apparel and just see straight through to someone that's doing a guide layout or finishing rods. I mean, our finish equipment is all exposed to the outside. You can be on the sidewalk and see someone finishing rods in there. So people's minds are just blown. They're like, wow, you build all of these right here? And I'm like, well, that's 3 dryers spinning and everyone holds 100 rods and they're pretty much full. So yep, we are doing them right here.
Okay. So excuse me. Let's get like a tiny little shameless plug in here, because you said that you might be hiring, or that's pretty consistent for you. So, people look all the time to get into the fishing industry, try new things, learn a hobby. That's kind of all these things wrapped up into one. So if somebody comes to your shop, they can first of all take a look around and maybe get a feel for if that could even be a good fit for them, right? But is that something that you'd be looking for people like even throughout the summer or into the winter?
Yeah, we're constantly, looking and, interviewing. And the first thing, and it's not for everybody. You guys know how tedious it is. We find that everyone likes the idea of being a fishing rod builder until they try to build a fishing rod.
Yeah.
Then they suddenly don't like it that much once you realize that it's it's pretty tricky. I mean, to get that first thread wrap started and that thing slips off of there 7 or 8 times and you want to just, break something. there's an art to it. So what we do is, on our website too, we have you can fill out an application. It's just a short little, 1-pager, and then we follow up with people. But the first step is really to bring them in, let them try it a little bit, make sure they have a knack for it and an interest and have the patience to do it. And then we kind of take it from there. So a couple different options, but yes, we're always looking for wrappers, but we do have some remote wrappers as well, but they have a lot of experience. Our 2 lead wrappers are actually in northern Wisconsin, and they've been wrapping rods for the one gal's her 30 would be her 37th year, because she started her 30th year with us, and the other 25 some years. So they've made a career, out of it. So with a lot of years with a competing rod company that everybody would probably know the household name of.
Yeah.
I'll let you paint the lines on that one.
Yeah.
So little head hunting goes on too.
Oh my gosh. The nice thing though is either way, there is a huge line of different rods and something that's going to fit everyone, whatever their angling style is. And so for people who cannot make it down to the shop, the website is very user friendly, and it does really a great job of kind of spelling out the different types of rods and all of that. So certainly encourage people to go and check that out. If you had to highlight a favorite or 2, I guess I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have a few rods that are your go-tos that you recommend?
Yeah. And the funny part about this is I get asked all the time, and my response is always the same. And I think to myself, I'm becoming like a one rod, fisherman. I got all these great rods, but everyone's just got that favorite that seems to work for them. And for me, it's the 7.6 JTX Lite. We lean on that so heavily in the tournament world. In the walleye game right now, there's the hottest thing around is throwing jigs with night crawlers at suspended fish, and that rod just does what no rod can do. I'm amazed when I look at tournament standings, and there's live stuff during the day, and I'm like, oh, that's a 7.6 JTX light. I didn't even know he was a customer. Or there'll be a tournament win out in Wyoming, and they'll do a review of some rods, and I'll get a glimpse, and it'll be a 7.6 light, and it's just like it spreads so wide that I can't even track the amount of tournament fishermen that are using it. And then I'll catch up with some bass buddies that fish competitive local circuits, and they're like, you wouldn't believe the amount of JTs that are on the deck of these bass boats for tournament guys, and such is like the ultimate drop shot rod, and it's just become like an underground kind of secret thing in these bass circuits, because it's marketed as a walleye rod, and these guys are trying to keep it kind of quiet because it's so good at drop shot, so it's just and that stuff is that stuff's really, really cool to hear. I just never would have dreamed it would have blown up into something like that, but it's really what kind of keeps you going.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
I'm just laughing that you're talking about my favorite crappy rod.
They're your favorite, huh?
Yeah, that's my exact point, right? And I have a guy that qualified for it's like the crappie Bassmaster Classic every year. I'm drawing a blank on what the name of it is, but it's like an invite only, high stakes down in the south. And he came to me because he's like, hey, I exclusively fish this tournament with all panhandlers and 7.6 light, and finished here out of all these anglers. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And now we're communicating on a regular basis about building a 12-foot crappie rod. And so that's how ideas end up coming to me. So
why do you like the 7.6? Why is that your favorite crappie rod?
Okay, because first of all, here's what I'm going to say is when you are in the pursuit of big panfish, it's different than just like your average pan fishing, right? Because I like a big bluegill, a big crappie. First of all, they're going to be, I don't know, they school up different, they swim different, they bite different. They just, there's a lot of pull to them. And so you need a rod that has a really great balance between like that finesse. Like you need to be able to feel that teeny tiny little bite. Sometimes the biggest fish, dink, is the bittiest bite, and so you need something that is delicate and finesse, but you need something that has a backbone to be able to handle a good fish. The other thing is when you're like good crappie fishing, so often you're mixed in with walleyes, you're mixed in with bass, you're mixed in with northern, you're mixed in with whatever else, because what those big panfish are eating, the other predators are usually eating as well, right? And so I need a rod that's also going to handle those fish, right? I don't want to break off every time I get a bass. I don't want to blow out the whole area just because a pike swam everywhere and dragged, whatever. And so when you can handle those big fish and still, get that finesse bite, there's nothing better than that. That's it.
That's awesome. No, that's a good explanation. Now, and I
it
really
comes in pink.
Yep, and like you mentioned, I mean, and a lot of people don't realize this is, I mean, we'll custom wrap, any color. I mean, we're still probably 15+% of the rods that come through there are, it's customized, by the customer, picking their colors, or getting a name put on a rod, or if we find that ash is in the bud of the favorite pet, is a common thing that we hear about now. So there's a lot of customization still going on. So
that is really cool.
Yeah,
so is that not your favorite rod? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. So like you guys are both talking about your favorite rods and like using that over and over, and I find myself like rod shuffling all the time, and that's just because. So the
technique specific.
Yeah. So the mag medium light is actually one that I fish with quite often as my float rod. And so like Emily said, like, you are fishing like bluegills and crappies, but when you're fishing like 10-inch bluegills and 12-inch crappies, and then you get like a bass, or every once in a while we'll get like a really nice walleye or a pike or something, it has enough power to be able to pull that stuff out of the weeds. And
Yeah.
so like a 10-inch bluegill is different than like your eater bluegill. Like that 3 inches of fish, it's amazing how much more pull, that bluegill has. And
Yeah, pound for pound, the hardest fighting fish. So, they
yeah, so
get sideways and you're like, what the heck do I got on here? And then, you get it close enough and they're doing the old circle thing and you're like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, it's just a hard fighting, bluegill, which
so
I
yeah,
just keep fighting halibut and I'm like, okay, this is like a 30-pound bluegill when they get sideways. Like hand the rod off because I can't even, handle it anymore. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's it may look kind of funny that I'm throwing a rod that big, but it is really warranted. And then right next to that I have the panhandler, and that's what I do almost all of my either vertical or short pitching with.
Sure.
Because I'll in the summertime I pitch like ice jigs. I
Yeah.
pitch it's stuff that you don't see a whole lot of people pitching, but it's you can't. If you have something that's bigger or doesn't have the backbone, it's not a fast action or an extra fast action. Like that jig's not going anywhere, and then you're not going to be able to feel anything.
Yeah,
and then
you need
next to that,
some whip to it to be able to actually get a small jig, and that's where length is important too. And a lot of people say, okay, so why are you using that 7.6 light so much? Because we're trying to take small jigs. A lot of times, eighth, and in clear water, situations, a lot of times we're trying to make a 50-60 foot cast with that and not have your, crawler or leech or minnow rip off of that either. So, having that whippy tip and that extra length, allows you to do that. And then you hit it right on the head. Getting bit's only the first part of the equation. You actually have to still land that fish. And the unique part about most of our rods is it can have a really, really light, soft tip, almost like a light or an ultralight. But then the power section of that rod will behave more like a medium. So as you start to transition through the load curve of that blank, you're getting to a power zone, and that's where the fighting, ability, comes in, and you need that. But you still have to have that really soft tip to be able to create a cadence and make that really long cast. So it's kind of, I look at a lot of the rods, specifically that one is more like a hybrid, where I always have a hard time labeling, what it is, because the top third of our rod will be a light, but the middle section will be more like a medium light, or a medium where you need it. So it's really kind of more like a hybrid design in everything that we build. So it's kind of tough to throw a power, length on that. And even the panhandlers are sneaky like that. I mean, that tip is an ultralight. I mean, it's as sensitive as any rod you're going to find out there. But a lot of guys are using that 7 foot for walleyes in a tournament application, catching, 8, 9, 10 pound walleyes with an ultralight for that same reason. You end up getting to quite a bit of power to be able to fight fish eventually within, the mid part of that rod. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, so that's, I have the medium light, I have the panhandler, and then I have the 7.6 light. And that's specifically for me, that's my panfish trolling rod.
Okay.
Because I get a little bit of extra length out of the back of the boat. So it like keeps the bait off, because a lot of times the bait, especially with smaller baits, are so close to the top of the water. And so if you don't have enough reach out, then your bait's going to be right up against the boat.
Yeah.
So that's part of what makes
from the boat. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what makes that successful. And I just feel like it's just a solid, for me, that's like the solid panfish trolling rod. And then I like the 7 foot light, and that's what I've been using a lot for like the jigging minnows. I've been using ultralight jerk baits a lot from Euro Tackle.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, that's a sweet jerk
that's a fun bait.
Yeah. And so that kind of sits right next to the deck to me. And I'm constantly just switching around, because we were talking about that water temp being high and all those fish being under the weeds, but we were also finding big schools of, I don't know, small to medium bass, and they were chasing because all the minnows couldn't be in the weeds because all the fish were there. So all the bait fish were pushed out to the middle of the lake
in the open water.
In the open water, and then you'd see like these blow ups every once in a while, and it was bass like picking them off.
Sure.
And so like we'd be trolling around or we'd be throwing a bobber, and then I'd just like hurry up, set it down, grab the light, and whip the jerk bait out there. And more or less just because we weren't really catching that much. I'm not trying to like catch a bunch of small bass, but it's just so fun on that light with a jerk bait. They just hit it so hard. So I'm I guess a rod scroller, but they all have their specific things. Like there's not a lot of crossover. I don't really mix them up too much. They all have their job in the boat.
Yeah, and you open my rod locker, and I mean you're always going to see a 6'9" black rain that's going to have either a number 7 or a number 9 blue chrome jig wrap on it. I mean that's a given. Almost always, I'm going to have an 8-foot snare, multiples of them that are rigged up for a bobber rod, and one will be set up to handle a leech. One will be set up with a plain hook that could take a minnow or a leech, and then they'll have another one for to thread on a night crawler under a bobber. So I'll have multiple bobber rods on, and then I'll have a 7/6 light with 2 or 3 of them with braid, and then 2 or 3 of them with mono. Tend to use mono more when the fish are suspended and I need to really hover a jig. If the fish are near the bottom, then I'm gonna be more apt to have braid on that rod. It'd probably be like a net head jig. So it's even though I talk about using that rod the most, there's still always a full gamut of rods tied up. Or if it's super, super windy, and I mean, there's an abnormally, large wind, which seems to be every tournament day this summer, I'll have the 9/2 snare, because that length again with that rod, when people can't nose into the wind and make a cast more than 10 feet because you're in a gale force wind, I can take that 9/2 and just underhand lob about anything of really good distance, and no matter what the wind is, it could be a 50-mile-an-hour wind, I'm still going to get that bait out there. So everything is very, very specific to what the conditions are.
Gosh. And as you look at the website, you just want one of everything because you just want to be prepared for everything, and that's the problem. So yeah, you'll have to maybe narrow it down to just 1 or 2, but
or buy them all.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, then the problem is that all of a sudden it's ice fishing, and then you're back to square one.
Yeah, back to building the ice rod collection. So we have you covered there too.
Well, and so as a tournament angler, and you and your rod business, one thing I appreciate about going to the store, and even your website, but just going to the store, is that you guys not only offer rods, but unlike you guys are unlike the other rod stores where it's mostly just the custom rods and that's what you get. You guys have like reels and tackle and stuff that like you can outfit. You can walk out of there like with a combo, it'll be ready to fish walking out of the store.
Yeah. And we're, a big foundation of what we do is, education. So when people come in, we want to make sure that they're going to be successful. And that's, a rod is just a part of the equation. It's just talking about line and when to use certain type of line. So I want to make sure I carry the stuff that I'm using, in the jigs and the type of jigs for different situations. I mean, I'll have the left side of the boat will be tungsten and the right side will be lead. And those are very different on when I go to each and why. So I want to make sure I have all that stuff, and I can outfit people with that, right down to leader line. I mean, if you're going from braid to a leader line is super important, and how to tie that knot successfully. So when someone comes to the store, I want to make sure that they're getting the they're getting the full system on and to be able to replicate exactly what we're doing. So not only do you get, high quality rods, you're going to get some education to be set up exactly how, we're doing it in the tournament world.
We talk all the time about confidence baits, and because there's something to that. Because the longer that you are willing to fish, the longer that lure is going to be in the water, the more that you cast it out, is the more likely you are to catch something on it. So, I really, truly, I don't know, but maybe there's a such thing now as a confidence rod, because I'm just hearing. I'm not trying to be silly, because it's when you go to a situation like what you're describing, you have kind of a store where people are friendly, where you can ask questions, where you can literally put these things together, right? When somebody has a new rod, sometimes they'll leave the store and they'll be like, I know exactly what I'm doing. And they get home and they start stringing it up and they're like, but wait, do I need, you always end up with the stupidest question. You feel like the stupidest question every time. I don't know. And so when you can go, you can be at the store, you can ask the questions, you can have that whole rod, set up, get the knowledge, and then be at the lake and cast out. I mean, maybe there is something to that because you're already a step ahead. When you didn't have all those questions going in and you have that confidence going in, sometimes that's one of those things that keeps you on the water, casting a little bit longer, maybe connecting with those fish. So I just think that is really worth something when you have that opportunity, not just to pick up products, but to really put something together that's going to work for you.
Yeah, we think there's real value there. I just think about my upbringing, and now when I go to big box store and I kind of watch, people's behavior, and I'll see someone just go to a rod rack and they'll kind of feel some different ones or whatever, and they won't get any, expert help or anything, and then they'll walk out with that rod, and I'm thinking to myself, I think they think that's going to be used for something, but I'm pretty well convinced that about 50% of the buyers that buy a fishing rod, they go home and they tie it up and they have the totally wrong lure on there for what that rod was designed to do. And that is really the most important thing. I mean, that's what technique specific means. I wouldn't sell somebody, a snare, to run jig wraps, right? Because it's not a jig wrap rod. It'd be probably a horrible experience. I'd set them up with the black rain. But if you don't get that guidance and you're not actually matching, the rod to the right technique, it could be a horrible experience. So, getting that input and having someone guide you through that is important. The first question that we ask is not, hey, what length or what power or what kind of action do you prefer? Our first question is, what kind of lures and what weight are you going to be throwing? That's the very first question. And they're like, oh, I'm looking to use this rod for 1/4 to 3/8 ounce jigs. I'm like, okay, here's the perfect rod for that. And we always start there. So it's not pick them up and what feels good in your hand. It doesn't really matter. It's what are you going to be using? What's the purpose of this rod? And then we're going to match the rod to that lure that you have in your hand.
Mm-hmm. So well, and the best part about the experience at your shop, I feel like, is that you guys, it's not an instance where you guys will be like, well, you guys, you're going out fishing, you're here, you're obviously wanting to get some rods, like, let's get you outfitted for every single technique out there, and then you'll be ready to go, right? This is something where you guys ask about what you're fishing for, how you're fishing, and set them up with like the unit that's available, that will be available in that situation. And so it's not super pushy, it's super knowledgeable, and you can build your repertoire of rods over time instead of feeling like you have to like walk out with a big bundle over your shoulder, right? So I think that's a pretty good thing about your store.
Yeah, but you can do that if you want.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really just about having the confidence when that customer walks out of the store and they bought a reel. The reel is going to be balanced and match to that rod. The line I set them up with is going to be appropriate for the technique that they're trying to utilize. So when they leave, I know that they're they made a good purchase, and the whole system is set up for them.
Well, and the whole system is, this comes right back to where you were talking about being a tournament angler, right? Because all of these different rods were built for somebody who, if you want to be your average fisherman, take your kid out to a dock and fish, and you want a nice rod to do it, that's perfect. But if you want to take your same JT rod and go and enter a tournament and be a serious angler and, get down to it, that's fine. You can do that. And I think it's cool when you have that, dare I say, amount of growth in your products, because when you have a good product that you can grow with, that you can learn with, that's where you're going to be connecting with fish. That's where that learning comes in. So I think that is really neat. But I'm going to continue with that tournament thing for a minute, because, we talked so much about like rods and what's available and how to find them. And certainly I hope that people come and visit you. But if people like follow you, even outside of the rod business, I mean, you have a lot of really exciting things going on, because you mentioned like all the tournaments and all that kind of stuff. So if people were to continue to follow along, that would be a great way to, maybe get some tips, get some tricks, hear about, some of those techniques that are working for you.
Yeah, I always try to do a follow-up and, give as much, detail as I can. The nice part about our tournament circuits is they mix around all the time. So if anyone asks me, I'm real open with what I use, because frankly, it doesn't really matter. Spots and lakes and everything change all the time. So that's really, really a nice part about, traveling circuits. I mean, it's not like your local, tournaments where guys only fish one and it's the same exact guys for the last, 30 years, and everyone's real protective over exactly everything that they're using. We're pretty open about, what worked for us. So yeah, if you want to follow along and ask questions, I'm always, happy to provide that knowledge.
And you post lots of fun stuff too. You're talking about just recently going to Alaska, and so you have some fish that I saw you posting there, some family photos. That's always kind of really fun to follow along. But Alaska is not a place that people get to go all the time, so that's a really fun thing to follow along with.
Yeah, it's a great trip. I'm fortunate enough that was my 8th trip to Southeast Alaska and to Ketchikan, and then going way back to high school, my dad used to bring me to more the inner part of Alaska, which would be the Kenai Peninsula. So I've done 4 or 5 trips around that Homer, Seward, Anchorage area, but we've really fallen in love with Southeast Alaska. So it's a great trip. A lot of halibut fishing. We always go during the salmon run so we can catch kings and silvers and pinks all at the same time. And then we've really fallen in love with shrimp, putting out shrimp pots and catching shrimp on our own and catching, Dungeness crab. And a lot of people don't think that's possible just going out in a regular, type of fishing boat. But we do a ton of that. Every single day we're putting on Dungeness crab traps, and we're putting in shrimp pots and, doing, fishing and, trapping all in the same day. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know I'm going to keep following along. And Josh was able to put some of the websites into the comment sections here. So I don't know if we put your how to follow you. So can you remind us, how do we follow you?
Yeah, it's just a personal page on Facebook. So just search up Joe Bricko, and you can follow me on there, or you can follow the business page, which we'll often share a lot of my tournament recaps and things, and a lot of our other pro staff on there at JT Outdoor Products.
Perfect. And we have that. Yeah, and we have that link right in that comment section, so people will be able to just click on it and get to that pretty easily. But oh my gosh, it's one of those moments where I'm like, I feel like we just started talking and now 15 minutes has gone by.
Yeah, time flies.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time this evening to be here with us and chat about all of this.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's always good connecting.
Yeah. And to the people at home, thank you guys for being here as well, because that's always a big part of the fun. And hopefully we see you guys out on the water. Otherwise, we'll see you on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.